warship Triumph took up position and marked it with a single light. At 3:30, the battleships Queen, Prince of Wales and London gathered nearby. Each carried 500 troops, the first wave. Small boats were lowered and men silently clambered into them. Muffled orders, a splash of oar and rope, a job to do. There was a faint breeze. The sea was smooth as glass. The bows of the 48 little boats created a phosphorescent wake in the green-black Aegean as they headed for shore some 2.5 miles away. A ghostly sort of light everywhere, wrote a soldier. Eerie, noted an historian. The voyage to the shores of the Turkish peninsula, a wild and desolate area, would take 3 hours. The lives of some of the young men, bound for the unknown shores, would last not much longer. 103 years ago they landed, on the sands and pebbles washed smooth by time and remembered in history, to a place where epic battles were fought many centuries ago, to a place of new battles, a place called Gallipoli. 103 years later, the new sons and daughters of Australia and New Zealand would also journey here in their thousands, in peace, to see the first light of dawn as the soldiers saw it, to be chilled by the cold night air, to imagine what it was like, to gather with former foes in bonds of friendship on Turkish soil, acknowledging her victory and sadness, to understand that she also lost many sons. 103 years ago, we gathered as the Australian Imperial Force, the first AIF, as the New Zealand Expeditionary Force. We pinned a badge to our lapels, caps and slouch hats and went to war, to serve our nation and crown, to join with others because it had to be done. Service, sacrifice, courage, mateship. We would come to this place as Australians and New Zealanders, as comrades in arms, landing in the darkness, waiting for the first light, for the rising sun. Wherever we came from, across the length and breadth of Australia and New Zealand, we would grow as people and as nations. Our men are not forgotten and are revered. In the famous words of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, your sons are now lying in our bosom and are in peace. After having lost their lives in the land, they have become our sons as well. Our sons, forever known as the ANZACs.
Tune kia kota, nā takahukura, nā manuwhitirea, moe moira, moe moira, moe moira. Tani kau ana tēnā kau mō koutou e, koutou kua whamama atu ki tāwhiti nui, ki tāwhiti roa, ki tāwhiti pāmama. Anei rā mātou nā kārana maha, he mau mai nei nā roi mata, te aroha, te hau ani ani mai nā maunahi, marai maha i te wākaina e. He nā hui a kai manua, nā kurupau nā mua o te aroa, me te whenua moe moia. Aha ko takoto koutou I whenua ke, he kore koutou e ware ware tia. Takoto mai, takoto mai, takoto mai ra e. E te iwi kua tai mai nei e, nā ka nohi oro rātou mā, kua mene atu ki toa e. Haere mai rā ki te whakanui te kaupapa hira hira nei e. Haere mai rā ki te tuku I te aroha o tō tātou toa, te kurataki hipuni te pō. Nau mai, haere mai, tau mai rā.
The battlefields are now silent, but what happened there left such an indelible mark that 103 years on, Australia, New Zealand and Turkey gather as friends rather than foes to reflect on the past and pay respect to the fallen, those for whom Gallipoli remains their final resting place, lest we forget.
E pare rā nā tai o mahara ki tu karae o Gallipoli. I kiki tonu nei ko te aroha mō rātau, I pare kura tia I naro noa, e whāna hoa noa ai roto I te wāti hei mauri ora. Tēnā koutou e nā mana whakaheke o tū o rongo, e mihi ana ki te whenua, e tangi ana ki te tangata. The tides of memory flow upon the shores of Gallipoli. The love within me aches for those decimated, for those vanquished, yet who are reborn at this moment, Te Mauroa, eternal sparks of life. We all acknowledge all who are now present, service people and civilians alike. We greet the land, we reach out to its peoples. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Oliver Teua, Commanding Officer of 36th Battalion of the Royal New Zealand Infantry Regiment. We are a direct descendant of the Auckland Infantry Battalion, who landed here 103 years ago. And it is my privilege to be your Master of Ceremonies for this morning's Anzac Day dawn service at Gallipoli. I will now broadly acknowledge our distinguished guests. Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Dame Patsy Reddy, GNZM, QSO, Governor-General of New Zealand. The Honourable Peter Dutton MP, the Australian Minister for Home Affairs and Minister for Immigration and Border Protection. Mr Tuldan Yilmaz, Deputy Governor of Chinakale. Ambassadors and members of the Diplomatic Corps, veterans, other distinguished guests. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you as we gather at this special place on the Gallipoli Peninsula to remember all those who served and died here 103 years ago, and to acknowledge that those who were once our adversaries are now our firm friends. Our service begins with the mounting of the Catafalque Party.
God, present! Ha! God, reverse!
I now invite Major General Peter Kelly, MNZM, Chief of Army New Zealand, to deliver the call to remembrance.
Behind me, exactly 103 years ago, thousands of Australians and New Zealanders were preparing to land along this coastline. The vast majority of them had never been under fire before, and as night gave way to day, they wondered if they would be found deficient in courage during the ordeal that lay ahead of them. For hundreds, it would be their last day on Earth. The physical and psychological shock of battle was almost overwhelming. In total, during the fierce and confused fighting of the first 3 days of the campaign, more than 1,000 Anzacs were killed. Their deaths created waves of grief which swept across our homelands. Neither the commanders of the ANZACs nor their men lacked physical courage. Indeed, there were innumerable acts of heroism and individual initiative. Almost all those who landed, however, were terribly inexperienced. They all had to grapple with the horrors of combat. At the same time, they had to make hideously difficult decisions under extreme pressure. It is not at all surprising that poor decisions were sometimes made, which cost the lives of many men. What is more, within hours, the hope of a swift victory was shown to be illusory. The Ottoman forces fought tenaciously and skillfully to defend their homeland. By the end of the first day, the impression of defeat was so strong that the Anzac commanders made an ill-conceived plea for immediate evacuation. Fortunately, the Allied commander recognised that an immediate evacuation would end in disaster. Those who survived this day 103 years ago never forgot their experiences here and the friends they lost on that first day of action. The 25th of April 1915 was seared into the memory of these men. Over the last century, what happened here has entered into the national psyche of Australians and New Zealanders. At the end of the First World War, the Anzacs returned to Gallipoli to walk this ground in search of the remains of their fallen comrades. Before long, memorials to the Anzacs were erected around the battlefield as a symbol of our loss and our promise to remember those who fought and fell. Australians and New Zealanders have for a century journeyed here, and they will continue to do so in the future. They are drawn to Gallipoli because the passing of time has not diminished the tragedy of what occurred here, its significance for us, or the debt we owe to those who served and sacrificed.
Our first commemorative address this morning will be delivered by the Honourable Peter Dutton, MP.
Your Excellency, the Governor-General of New Zealand and Sir David, Ministers, Members of Parliament, Excellencies, men and women of the Australian and New Zealand Defence Forces, both serving and past, ladies and gentlemen. We feel we know them, the men who served here. Some were young, still only boys. Others were older with families of their own. We know their names, their hometowns, and we see too many of their names etched on graves and memorials and cemeteries across Gallipoli. We know of their battles, the landing in Krithia, Lone Pine, the Neck, Hill 60, Chinook Bear, among others. We know too of the daily struggle to hold their positions on the ridges above the Aegean, at places like Quinn's Post, where friend and foe were separated by mere metres. The efforts to get water up to the ridgelines, to bring casualties down to the beach, the dark, damp work of the men tunnelling, constructing great underground passages. We know of the ever-present danger of illness, snipers' bullets and shrapnel. We know about the swarms of flies, the oppressive heat of summer, and the storms and snow as winter approached. We know many of their stories. Told in the traces that have survived for more than a century, through letters and diaries that have become treasured family possessions or part of our rich public archives. Even now, some artefacts still lie on the battlefield, providing a glimpse of their everyday lives. Sadly, some stories we will never know, lost in the dust and smoke of battle or left untold. Some who served here spent months on Anzac, enduring shifts in seasons and fortunes. Many of the survivors of the gruelling 8-month campaign went on to serve in the Middle East or on the Western Front. Frank Zillman was one of those men. Born in Strathpine in Queensland, Frank was a fencing contractor before he enlisted aged just 18. He joined the 2nd Light Horse Regiment on Gallipoli as a reinforcement in October 1915. Frank was an Anzac during the autumn storms and snow in late November and was evacuated to hospital on the 9th of December and never returned to Gallipoli. But his war was far from over. Frank was one of the many Gallipoli veterans who went on to serve on the Western Front. Arriving in France in June of 1916, Frank served with the 5th Divisional Ammunition Column and a year later with the 13th Field Artillery Brigade. On 4 April 1918, only days after he'd returned from leave, Frank was mortally wounded when his battery was shelled while marching into Quarriere. He was just 21 years old. It is the greatest honour for all of us to gather here at North Beach as dawn breaks, more than a century after this campaign was fought. It is humbling to stand among our New Zealand and Turkish friends and reflect on the service and sacrifice of the tens of thousands of people on both sides of the campaign who lost their lives. Those who never had the chance to return home to loved ones, to live the lives they had planned. But their legacy remains, a legacy of resilience, of determination, facing decisions and sights we would never wish upon anyone. We feel we know them, the ANZACs, not only because they fought to defend us and sacrifice for us, it is also the power of that sacrifice which forged a young nation, and values they embodied and bequeathed to us survive to this very day. They are at the core of our people and our purpose, and for this we will be eternally grateful, lest we forget.
The Turkish forces who opposed the Anzacs at Gallipoli were led by Mustafa Kemal, as Mustafa Kemal Ataturk was the founder of modern Turkey and became the first president of the Republic of Turkey. I now invite Colonel Bahadur Bozkurt of the Turkish Army, who will read in Turkish, then English, this remarkable tribute paid to the Anzacs in 1934 by President Mustafa Kemal Ataturk.
Bu memleketin toprakları üzerinde kanlarını döken kahramanlar. Burada bir dost vatanın toprağındasınız. Huzur ve sükun içinde uyuyunuz. Sizler Mehmetçiklerle yan yana koyun koyunasınız. Uzak diyarlardan evlatlarını harbe gönderen analar. Gözyaşlarınızı dindiriniz. Evlatlarınız bizim bağrımızdadır. Huzur içindedirler ve huzur içinde rahat rahat uyuyacaklardır. Onlar bu toprakta canlarını verdikten sonra artık bizim evlatlarımız olmuşlardır. Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. Those heroes that shed their blood and lost their lives, you're now lying in the soil of a friendly country. Therefore, rest in peace. There is no difference between the Johnnies and the Mehmets to us, where they lie side by side here in this country of ours. You, the mothers, who send their sons from faraway countries, wipe away your tears. Your sons are now lying in our bosom and are in peace. After having lost their lives on this land, they have become our sons as well. Mustafa Kemal Atatürk.
The choir of St James from Sydney will now sing the hymn, O Valiant Hearts. Please stand and join them.
Through
Please be seated. Our second commemorative address this morning will be delivered by Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Dame Patsy Reddy, GNZM, QSO, Governor-General of New Zealand.
Tēnā tātou katoa, tēnā tātou o te moana nui a kiwa. He tapu tō te roimata, he tohu whai mana, he kaikawi kōrero, mō te haukere o te puri, mō te hangu o te aroha. Greetings to us all. Greetings to us of the South Pacific. There is sacredness in tears. They are the marks of power. They are the messengers of overwhelming grief and unspeakable love. Sir Alan Duncan, United Kingdom Minister of State for Europe and the Americas, the Honourable Peter Dutton, Australian Minister for Home Affairs, Immigration and Border Protection, Mr Turan Yilmaz, Deputy Governor of Chanakale, and other representatives of the regional government, senior military representatives, ambassadors, defence attaches, other diplomatic representatives, ladies and gentlemen. Today, as we gather to remember the fateful events that occurred on this beachhead and the hills beyond 103 years ago, we can reflect on the optimism of the commander of the New Zealand and Australian Division, Major General Sir Alexander Godley, who wrote that only bullets could make his division better. By better, he meant that only combat experience would make his force more effective. As it happened, the inexperience of the Anzacs, and of their commanders in particular, was brutally exposed in the opening hours and days of the disastrous battle that followed. Combat experience, in this instance, came at a fearful cost. The New Zealand government was fully expected there to be heavy losses and was prepared to reinforce the New Zealand Expeditionary Force as soon as it was committed to battle. The Minister of Defence had told Godley, "I am quite sure that you will do all what New Zealand expects of you, and I sincerely hope that divine providence will protect you all. There must be losses, and we have to face them." However, the government was shocked by the sheer magnitude of what was referred to as the Butcher's Bill. The South African War of 1899 to 1902 had claimed the lives of around 200 New Zealanders. That total was eclipsed within just a few days at Gallipoli. Such were the losses that during the course of the campaign, the New Zealand units engaged here had to be reinforced by more than 100% of their original strength. Australian units experienced a similar attrition. Many men were at Gallipoli for only a short period before they were killed or wounded. Rations were inadequate and frequently inedible, and they failed to provide adequate nourishment. Disease was rife, and many soldiers became so sick that they had to be evacuated. Others endured months of hardship that marked them for life. To survive at the Anzac beachhead, it was not enough for soldiers to have an indomitable spirit. They also needed a good measure of luck. In 1915, people in New Zealand and Australia were stunned by the long casualty lists in the newspapers. Families and communities felt the shock and grief of lives cut short, of hopes, dreams, and aspirations that would never be filled. Today, as we remember the suffering and heroism of our forebears on this small stretch of land, we also reflect on the lessons we learned from our history. The appalling bloodshed of the First World War led to concerted efforts to pursue and secure world peace. As it happened, these efforts were to fail in 1939, and nations again experienced the horrors of global conflict. Following the Second World War, an international system was established to forestall another such recurrence. Although imperfect, this system has remained the best mechanism we have to avoid the terrible bloodshed and loss of life experienced by our soldiers in 2 world wars. Today, as we honour our forebears and their service to our countries, we affirm our commitment to work together to achieve and maintain collective security and peace. Ka maumahara tonu tātou ki a rātou. We will remember them.
Chaplain Class 2, Diana Woods, RNZAF, Principal Chaplain Domestic Services of the New Zealand Defence Force, will now lead us in the Lord's Prayer.
Recognising that our troops who landed here in 1915 would, many of them, have prayed this prayer themselves, perhaps you would join with me in praying. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial, and deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen.
Wreaths will now be laid by official representatives. To acknowledge the bond between Australia and New Zealand and the significance of the Anzac tradition, the first wreaths will be laid together by Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Dame Patsy Reddy, on behalf of the people of New Zealand, and the Honourable Peter Dutton MP, Minister for Home Affairs and Minister for Immigration and Border Protection, on behalf of the Government and people of Australia. The next wreath will be laid by Mr. Turan Yilmaz, Deputy Governor of Çanakkale, on behalf of the Government and people of the Republic of Turkey. The next wreath on behalf of the Republic of Austria, the People's Republic of Bangladesh, Canada, and the French Republic, by Her Excellency Ulrich Tilly, Dr. Mohammed Monirul Islam, Mr. Ulrich Shannon, and Mr. Bertrand Bush-Voltaire. The next wreaths on behalf of the Federal Republic of Germany, the Hellenic Republic of Greece, and Hungary, by His Excellency Martin Erdmann, Colonel Dimitrios Arampatsis, and Lieutenant Colonel Janos Vagra. The next wreaths on behalf of the Republic of India, Ireland, and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, by His Excellency Rahul Kulshrestha, Ms. Orla Condron, and the Right Honourable Sir Alan Duncan, KCMG MP. The next wreaths on behalf of the Defence Forces of New Zealand, Australia, and the United Kingdom, by Major General Peter Kelly, MNZM, Air Marshal Leo Davies, AO, CSC, and Admiral Sir Philip Jones, KCB, ADC. The final wreaths will be laid on behalf of all veterans of New Zealand, Australia, and the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, by Lieutenant Colonel Catherine Lee, Major General Craig Orme, DSC, AM, CSC, and Mr. Julian Evans. It is now time to reflect and to silently remember all those who have served and died in war. The ode will now be read and will be followed by the last post, 1 minute silence and reveille. Please stand. The ode will be recited in Te Reo Māori by Warrant Officer David Lark, Royal New Zealand Air Force, and in English by Warrant Officer Robert Swanwick, Warrant Officer of the Royal Australian Air Force.
E kore rātou, e ko mātua te. Pēnei a tātou kua māhui nei. E kore hoki rātou e noi kore. Aha ko pēhena huatanga o te wā. I te hikina atu o te rā. Tainoa ki te āranga mai i te ata. Ka momahara tonu tātou ki a rātou. Ka momahara tonu tātou ki a rātou.
They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
God, present! Hot!
Please remain standing for the national anthems of Turkey, New Zealand and Australia.
God, present, hot.
I now invite Principal Chaplain Colin Acton, RAN, Director General Chaplaincy of the Royal Australian Navy, to offer final blessing.
Dear friends, go forth into the world in peace Be of good courage. Render to no one evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the afflicted. Give honour and respect to all. Love and serve the Lord. Rejoicing in the power of the Holy Spirit, and the blessing of God Almighty, Father, Son and Holy Spirit be upon you and those you love now and always. Amen.
Please be seated. We began our service today with the mounting of the Kara Folk Guard, and now the Kara Folk Party will be dismounted.
Guard! And words! Ta! Guard! Hook!
E rere atu nei te tangi whakawhetai konei I te kurae o Karapuri. Atu e te manawa tapu nai tātou ka hui nei. Taino ki ngā whenua taurikura, ki ngā pākainga o ngā tamatoa atu mātauanga. Titi hoa ki te nāko o ngā whānau kapani nei. Tēnei te pau toko manawa, te pau o i nei kōrero. Hui te marama, hui te ora, hui te aroha nui. A voice of prayer sets flight from this place, from the headland of Gallipoli, from the breathing hearts of we now gathered here to the precious earth of our homelands, to the outermost ends of the earth, to the homes of the offspring of the gods of war, to settle in the hearts of the families who mourn still. It is with these words from our very souls, that speak of understanding, that speak of our well-being, that speak of our great love. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our dawn service here at Gallipoli, to commemorate the 103rd anniversary of the Anzac landings. Thank you.
Welcome back to our special Anzac Day coverage. I'm Joe O'Brien. Through today, we're bringing you the atmosphere of Anzac Day from across this huge country and overseas too. We had the Australian dawn services this morning. The marches have been underway too. We've just seen that very moving overseas dawn service at Gallipoli. And coming up in 10 minutes or so, we'll broadcast the dawn service from Villers-Bretonneux in France, the side of the Western Front where so many Australians' lives were lost in World War I. Now, the Sir John Monash Centre has been officially opened in Villers-Bretonneux in France. About 200 people, including the relatives of soldiers who fought in the Great War, attended. Both the Australian and French Prime Ministers Malcolm Turnbull and Edouard Philippe paid tribute to the sacrifices and bravery of the men who never returned. Europe correspondent Lisa Miller was there.
Well, this is one of the entrances to the Sir John Monash Centre, and it is now officially opened. Malcolm Turnbull did the honours at a ceremony that had a mix of Australian and French influences. He was joined by the French Prime Minister, who gave a moving speech talking about the connection between the two countries and how this brave and young nation of Australia had written its own history by helping France write its history. It brought a tear to the eye of some people in the crowd. Malcolm Turnbull also spoke movingly of the sacrifices that occurred on the Western Front in the Great War.
And in the midst of the stone and the steel and the glass of this serene monument, we know that the best way to honour the diggers of 1918 is to support the servicemen and women, the veterans and their families of today, lest we forget.
Tony Abbott, the former Prime Minister, was also in the crowd. He was one of the key drivers of the construction of this museum, and although he no doubt would have wanted to be here as the Prime Minister to open it, Malcolm Turnbull ensured that he was invited, and it was an invitation he was keen to take up.
This was where we changed the course of world history. What Monash and his men did, first at Villers-Bretonneux on Anzac Day 1918, then at La Hamel on the 4th of July 1918, and finally at the Battle of Amiens on the 8th of August 1918, the Black Day for the German army, was quite simply change the course of world history.
Malcolm Turnbull has his own connection here on the Western Front. His wife Lucy's great uncle lost his life. Robert Hughes was a newly married young doctor when he went to war. Within 5 days of arriving on the Somme, he was hit by a shell while treating a wounded digger, and he died in the arms of his brother. 7 weeks later, his wife had a baby boy. The Turnbulls left flowers on his grave, not far from here, near Amiens. This is where the dawn service will take place. The cemetery and the graves are just behind the museum there. They're expecting in excess of 8,500 people. Among the VIPs, Prince Charles, who'll be coming to pay his tributes. It's expected to be the biggest dawn service in modern times on the Western Front, and it comes in this final year of the Centenary commemorations in one of the deadliest places that Australia knew during World War I.
Lisa Miller reporting there, and she's at that Sir John Monash Centre right now as they prepare to start that ceremony, the dawn service there at Villers-Bretonneux, and she's just tweeted a photo showing everyone really rugged up there at that spot, so it's a chilly start there for that dawn service in France that we'll bring to you in a few minutes. And Lisa's done a really good piece where she walks through that interpretive centre that's been set up there at the Sir John Monash Centre that's opened in the last few days, and you can go to the ABC website if you want to take a closer look at that. Now, back in 1918, the German Army's spring offensive on the Western Front was one of the most decisive moments of World War I. The Allied forces came precariously close to losing control of key French cities and supply routes for arms and food. The little town of Villers-Bretonneux became the theatre of one of the greatest victories of the conflict. Jeremy Fernandez explains.
Villers-Bretonneux, a small prehistoric village that in 1918 found itself on one of the most critical junctions of the First World War. It sits on a plateau in northern France. This is where the Germans launched their spring offensive, a series of battles designed to overpower and conquer gaps in the British and French lines of defence. The Germans had been emboldened and fortified. Just months earlier, Tsarist Russia and its army had collapsed, freeing up between 500,000 and 1 million German troops from the Eastern Front to move to the Western Front. Their goal was to take the town of Amiens, a key road, rail and supply hub. The Allies feared that to lose Amiens would be to lose Paris and the war. The first domino to fall to the Germans was the village of La Hamel and the strategic lookout called Hill 104. Next in their sights, Villers-Bretonneux, the gateway to Amiens. Australian reinforcements were sent in from Belgium to aid the depleted British forces. For weeks, they held the Germans back. Then, at dawn on April the 24th, the Germans took Villers-Bretonneux. It was the first time ever that fighting involved tanks fighting against tanks. But the German occupation was short-lived. Two Australian brigades, the 13th and the 15th, used the unconventional tactic of attacking at night from opposite directions, north and south. Taking the Germans by surprise in the dark was risky. Even the official war correspondent Charles Bean noted he went to bed thoroughly depressed, feeling certain that this hurried attack would fail hopelessly. But the Aussies triumphed against the odds with the help of British reinforcements who arrived at dawn. Within 24 hours, the German occupation of Villers-Bretonneux was over. It was lost on no one that victory came on the 3rd anniversary of the Anzac landing at Gallipoli. It was a massive strategic blow to the Germans, now disconnected from their own supplies of food and arms. The victory at Villers-Bretonneux drew a new front line, ending the German offensive on the Somme. About 2,400 Australians died in the battle, a heavy price with a lasting legacy.
Jeremy Fernandez reporting there. Thanks for joining us through today on the ABC News channel for our special coverage of Anzac Day. We've seen the dawn services here in Australia at places like Currumbin and down at Torquay in regional Victoria. Some big crowds in rural and regional Australia for those dawn services. I think there was about 8,000 in Torquay, and some beautiful images there. And it really does look like the landscape of Gallipoli there in Western Victoria. Now, we've had the marches in the capital cities as well that we've brought you coverage of, and our attention has turned overseas in the last hour or so. We saw the service there from Gallipoli. The dawn service at Villers-Bretonneux is about to begin, and there's special significance there this year, as you've seen with that story from Lisa Miller just before, with the opening of the Sir John Monash Centre, which the Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull spoke at overnight, as well as the French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe. Many people keen to see greater recognition and prominence given to the efforts of Australians on the Western Front during World War I. So special significance with this ceremony just about to get underway at Villers-Bretonneux in France.
It was on this day 100 years ago, Australian troops earned one of their greatest victories of World War I, here in Villers-Bretonneux in France. In the April of 1918, the war on the Western Front was raging fiercely. The German spring offensive against the Allied lines had seen the village of Villers-Bretonneux, the last tactical position before the strategic town of Amiens, fall into enemy hands. So with Amiens now vulnerable, recapturing Villers-Bretonneux was crucial, and the responsibility was handed to the Australian 13th and 15th Brigades, who launched a stunning counterattack on the German troops at 10 p.m. on April the 24th. The battle was fierce, the losses were heavy, but the Australians fought bravely, and by dawn on the 3rd anniversary of Anzac Day, they'd broken through the enemy positions, and the French and Australian flags were raised over Villers-Bretonneux. The French have never forgotten the sacrifice of those soldiers, and the Australian National Memorial here commemorates all Australians who fought in France and Belgium, and includes the names of thousands who died with no known grave, lest we forget.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the Anzac Day dawn service at the Australian National Memorial at Villers-Bretonneux, northern France. Good afternoon also to the many Australians who may be watching this broadcast back home in Australia and elsewhere. We wish you were here with us among the quiet ghosts on the Western Front to express our eternal gratitude for their sacrifice. I am Major General Mark Kelly, the Repatriation Commissioner at the Australian Department of Veterans Affairs, and it is my great privilege to be your Master of Ceremonies for this morning's service to mark the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Villers-Bretonneux. I will now broadly acknowledge our official guests. His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, the Honourable Malcolm Turnbull MP, Prime Minister of Australia, and Miss Lucy Turnbull, AO. Monsieur Edouard Philippe, Prime Minister of the French Republic. Ambassadors and members of the Diplomatic Corps. Veterans, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. A special mention also for all our young men and women of the Australian Defence Force, those serving in the Royal Australian Navy, the Australian Army and the Royal Australian Air Force, the Australian custodians of the Anzac tradition. Wherever you are serving, we await your safe return. Here, in this very place, in the Somme Valley, where 100 years ago Australian soldiers fought and died, we gather to remember those whose courage, endeavour and sacrifice during the final campaigns on the Western Front in 1918 enhanced the Anzac legend. Our service today begins with the mounting of the catapult party. The catapult party will be led to the memorial by the colour party of the 51st Battalion, the Far North Queensland Regiment, with the battle honour Villers-Bretonneux emblazoned on its regimental colour, representing all the units of the 1st AIF which served on the Western Front, and in particular, the Australian infantry battalions that fought in this battle 100 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand.
Catapult party, quick march. Catapult party, present. Arms. Catapult party, reverse. Catapult party, slow. Catapult party, rest on.
Please be seated. I now invite His Excellency, Mr. Brendan Byrne, the Australian Ambassador to the French Republic, to welcome you here.
Bonjour. I would like to welcome you here to the Australian National Memorial in the Val de Somme, France. Australiens et Français, je vous accueille aujourd'hui chaleureusement à cette cérémonie de l'aube en cet Anzac Day pour le centenaire de la bataille de Villers-Bretonneux, ici, dans le Val de Somme. The Anzac Day dawn service this year, 2018, is also the centenary of the Battle of Villers-Bretonneux. Almost no other place in France is as well known as Villers-Bretonneux. Here, where 100 years ago, Australian soldiers attacked in the same dark hours that we see around us now. Cette cérémonie de 2018, marquant le centenaire de la bataille, est aujourd'hui devenue le symbole de l'origine de l'amitié franco-australienne. Peu de villes françaises connaissent la même notoriété que Villers-Bretonneux dans le cœur des Australiens. Between 1914 and 1918, soldiers came from all over the world to fight in France and Belgium, and few came further than the men of the Australian Imperial Force. When the Australians began arriving in France in 1916, they included many who had once immigrated from places in the United Kingdom, New Zealand, and even France. Les forces du monde entier sont venues combattre en Europe, mais peu venaient d'aussi loin que les troupes australiennes. Quand les forces australiennes sont arrivées en France, il y avait des hommes de différentes origines, dont des Français. Auguste Pierre Lafargue was born in Bordeaux, but at a young age he developed a fascination with Australia. Known in Australia as Gus, he was moved to enlist by loyalty to France, the land of his birth, and to Australia, the home he had chosen. He joined the Australian Imperial Force in June 1915 on his second attempt. Auguste Pierre Lafargue avait quitté la France pour se lancer à l'aventure en Australie. Devenu habitant de l'État de Victoria, il était alors connu sous le nom de Gus. En juin 1916, il est revenu en France sous l'uniforme des forces impériales australiennes. Le 20 juillet, il a pris part au combat à Fromelles. At 3 o'clock on the morning of 20 July 1916, Auguste went into battle at Fromelles. As the brigade's machine gunners fired at the strong point known as the Sugar Loaf, they came under heavy artillery fire. Auguste was wounded in the arms and the legs. Happily, Auguste survived the war and got to see his mother in his native Bordeaux, unlike his two brothers, killed in the French army. Blessé aux bras et aux jambes, Auguste a survécu à la guerre, contrairement à ses deux frères, combattants de l'armée française. Il a pu revoir sa mère à Bordeaux. Today, as we remember the sacrifice of those who served on the Western Front, I can think of no better symbol of the friendship formed between our two countries on the battlefields of the First World War than a man like Auguste Lafargue, who enlisted to fight in the First World War and who, in a very real sense, served both France and Australia. Auguste Lafargue incarne tant l'amitié franco-australienne qui nous unit depuis de nombreuses années que la valeur des sacrifices qui nous ont alliés dans le sombre moment de la Grande Guerre. Remembering these things, I think, gives cause to be thankful. In this spirit, I thank all of you for taking the time to be here this morning. En mémoire de ces actes de bravoure et d'amitié, je vous remercie tous pour votre présence ici ce matin. I particularly extend my thanks to His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, Malcolm Turnbull, Prime Minister of Australia, Edouard Philippe, Prime Minister of the French Republic, Maurice Payne, Minister for Defence of Australia, Jean-Yves Darrieussecq, Secretary of State for Veterans and Commemorations of France, Warren Snowden, representing the Leader of the Opposition, Laurent Saumon, President of the Departmental Council of the Somme, Philippe de Mester, Préfet of the Somme, Air Marshal Mark Binskin, Chief of the Defence Force, Général d'Armée François Lecontre, Chef d'État-Major des Armées, members of the Diplomatic Corps, senateurs et députés and members of Parliament, invited guests, veterans, ladies and gentlemen, merci.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I now invite Air Chief Marshal Mark Binskin AC, the Australian Chief of Defence Force, to deliver the call to remembrance.
Before April 1918, Villers-Bretonneux had been spared the worst ravages of fighting on the Western Front. Yet the signs of war were clear in the aircraft that flew overhead, in the ceaseless rumble of the front, and in the constant passage of vehicles and soldiers through the town. 16 kilometres behind you to the west, thousands of men and tons of material crowded the busy streets and railway station at Amiens. Like many of you gathered here this morning, members of my own family were among them. Private Alfred Binskin and his brother George. Enduring machine guns, artillery, aerial bombing and gas attacks, both were wounded at various times during the war, but ultimately survived. Tragically, 60,000 other Australians didn't. As a crossroads, Amiens had been the object of invading armies for more than 1,000 years. In 1918, it was the main transport hub for the British sector of the Western Front. To seize it, the Germans had to first pass through Villers-Bretonneux. They tried on 4 April. A British cavalryman seeking cover from machine gun fire peeped over the edge of a quarry outside the town as the Germans attacked. He remembered it looked as if the whole German army was advancing unmolested across the plain. But for a courageous counterattack by Australian and British infantry with bayonets fixed, Villers-Bretonneux might have fallen that afternoon. No longer kilometres behind the lines as it had been for most of the war, the town was, said one Australian officer, a shocking sight. Every house seemed to have been hit. 3 weeks later, the Germans attacked again. The British troops manning the line were young and inexperienced, and for many it was their first time at the front. Through the night of 23 and 24 April, they endured a heavy bombardment as the Germans sent over gas shells. Then, at dawn, 4 German divisions, with tanks spitting machine gun fire, emerged from the morning mist. They were soon in the town, and shortly afterwards German patrols were moving into the countryside beyond. From there, for the first time since 1914, German soldiers glimpsed Amiens. The Allies had to retake Villers-Bretonneux. 2 Australian brigades, the 13th and 15th, were ordered from their billets and began marching towards the town. They were full of confidence, helmets cocked and cigarettes in mouths, said the journalists who watched them come past. Late on the evening of 24 April, as they approached their start lines, word passed between the Australians. In a few hours it would be Anzac Day. They determined then to mark the anniversary with a significant victory. They began their advance in the dark. Then German flares went up and an officer shouted, "Still." Along the line, men stood motionless, waiting for the light to fade. A medical officer going forward with the infantry recalled, the darkness in the front started to tap, 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 and bullets whistled round and the line shuffled forward with rifles at the ready. The whistle of bullets became a swish and a patter, and boys fell all around me, generally without a sound. Corporal Edward Stedman in the 51st Battalion saw the shells bursting and very lights going up. It was just like daylight. The machine gun fire was the worst, but by sheer luck I found a gap in the wire and led my section through. Many others were less fortunate, and daylight revealed the dead of 2 Australian battalions tangled in the German wire. But the attack succeeded. Anzac Day 1918 dawned with the news of a stunning victory. A century on, Australians and the people of Villers-Bretonneux remember it still. What happened here on 25 April 1918 has created a lasting bond. After Villers-Bretonneux, the Germans never advanced again on this part of the front. Today, we remember all of those who fought here, and we honour those who lost their lives here.
Thank you, CDF. Our first commemorative address this morning will be delivered by the Honourable Malcolm Turnbull MP, Prime Minister of Australia.
In the quiet peace of dawn, we pause and remember this place as it was 100 years ago. Green fields and trees have returned to take the place of mud and trenches and all the wreckage of war. A landscape of peace, but one hard won by young Australians fighting with the soldiers of the British Empire and of France. The deeds of these young men have echoed down the years. Here on the Western Front, death had seized the landscape and refused to yield, a stalemate. And then, in March 1918, a German onslaught began, the Spring Offensive, Ludendorff's battle of annihilation. Their march west seemed unstoppable, and on April 24th, Villers-Bretonneux was captured for a second time. The small village had to be rescued, a vital point, the key to Amiens. It could not be allowed to be held by the enemy. The Australians were called upon just 3 years on from the landing on Gallipoli. It was said they had no chance, but they were confident, and it was Anzac Day the next day. At 10:10, the 13th Brigade advanced in classic Australian style. "Boys, you know what you have to do. Get on with it," was the laconic pep talk from one officer. The whistle of bullets, said one captain, became a swish and a patter, and the boys fell all around me, generally without a sound. It was far unlike any experience before, but still they pushed on. And shortly before midnight, with a ferocious roar, the 15th Brigade joined the assault. As dawn broke, at this moment, a century ago, victory appeared certain. April the 25th, 1918, Anzac Day. It was, to both friend and foe, one of the greatest feats of the war. The cost was great. 3,900 Australian men were ordered to fight. There were about 2,500 casualties. But Villers-Bretonneux was saved. The architect of victory, Sir John Monash, described it as the turning point in the war. The Australians had come from the other side of the world to defend the freedom of France. And we meet here 100 years later on land long healed to remember them. And we join Australians everywhere in remembering all the men and women who've served our nation and who are serving it today. We honour their bravery, their sacrifice, their loyalty. We show they are not forgotten. For the best way to honour the courage and sacrifice of the diggers of World War I is to support the servicemen and women, the veterans and the families of today. On this dawn, we're joined by friends, the people of France, the people of Villers-Bretonneux. Do not forget Australia's sons. They are their sons too. Here the Australian flag flies high. Kangaroos guard the entrance to the town hall. Victoria School, rebuilt with donations from Australians' children, is stamped with the words, "N'oublions jamais l'Australie." Let us never forget Australia. There is love and heartfelt gratitude here. There is friendship. We are mates, brothers in arms, just as the Australian digger and the French poilu were mates a century ago, just as they are in freedom's cause today. Let us remember the value of friendship on this day and in this year, 100 years since the First World War and its terrible destruction ended. Let us vow to learn the lessons of that destruction, to open our arms and our hearts to our neighbours, and let us commit to forging a stronger, safer world together. We honour the sacrifice of the Anzacs, and we honour the values for which they fought: freedom, democracy, and the rule of law, our Australian way of life. In every age, freedoms hard won and hard held, lest we forget.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Please stand and join the Voices of Birraloo Choir and the Australian Army Band in singing the hymn, "Abide with Me."
Lord,
Please be seated. Our second commemorative address this morning will be delivered by Monsieur Édouard Philippe, Prime Minister of the French Republic.
Les Australiens le connaissent bien, les Français peu ou pas du tout, et c'est de lui que je voudrais parler ce matin à l'aube. Une photo le montre à l'âge de 16 ou 17 ans, il a menti sur son âge pour s'engager, dans son uniforme neuf. Son visage d'adolescent tranche avec la longue baïonnette qui prolonge le fusil qu'il tient avec fierté. Cet homme, c'est Alec Campbell, le dernier survivant australien de la bataille de Gallipoli. Il vous a quitté, Monsieur le Premier ministre, en 2002. Sa disparition a créé une vive émotion en Australie. Cette émotion, nous l'avons connue, nous aussi, en France, quand Lazare Ponticelli, le dernier poilu français, s'est éteint en 2008. Avec lui, le lien charnel, physique, qui nous reliait encore à la tragédie, se rompait. Ne restait que notre mémoire collective et notre ferme volonté de la faire vivre. J'ignore si, en ce 25 avril 1915, les milliers de jeunes Australiens avaient conscience qu'en posant le pied sur la plage de la presqu'île de Gallipoli, leur nation, l'Australie, foulait avec eux le sol de l'histoire. Certains se diront peut-être que Gallipoli est un curieux berceau pour une nation, a fortiori pour une nation du Pacifique. Tous ceux qui aiment l'histoire savent qu'à quelques dizaines de kilomètres se dressait la fière cité de Troie. Ils savent aussi que, près de 500 ans avant Jésus-Christ, le grand roi perse Xerxès avait tenté de relier les deux rives grâce à un pont de bateaux pour envahir la Grèce depuis l'Asie mineure. Se le rappeler, c'est reconnaître le courage de ces centaines de milliers de volontaires australiens pour qui la distance ne justifiait pas l'indifférence au sort du monde. Mal préparée, la bataille tourne au désastre. Gallipoli rejoint Verdun, le chemin des dames, les offensives de la Somme, au chapitre des hécatombes de la Première Guerre mondiale. Puis ces jeunes Australiens ont connu la boue. Ils ont connu les poux, les rats, le gaz. Ils ont connu les bombardements, les vies fauchées, le froid, la faim. Ils ont connu la peur, le découragement, les larmes. Mais le 25 avril 1918, ils ont connu la victoire. Et quelle victoire! 3 ans après Gallipoli, l'Anzac donne à Villers-Bretonneux un coup d'arrêt à l'offensive ennemie sur Amiens, au prix d'un lourd sacrifice accepté par la 13e brigade de la 4e division et de la 15e brigade de la 5e division, commandées respectivement par William Glasgow et Harold Elliott. Ces événements, à la fois heureux et tragiques, ils les ont vécus aux côtés de leurs alliés britanniques, du Commonwealth, de Belgique et bien sûr de France. 313 000 Australiens ont combattu en France et en Belgique. 1 sur 2 a été blessé au combat. 1 sur 6 n'est jamais retourné au pays. Et c'est sur la plage de Gallipoli, sur les champs de la Somme, où nous combattions ensemble, que s'est forgée entre ces nations la fraternité du sang versé. En 1943, dans son ouvrage « La paix », le grand écrivain allemand Ernst Junger écrit « La Première Guerre et la Seconde Guerre mondiale sont liées entre elles comme 2 continents de feu qu'une chaîne de volcans réunis. L'histoire s'est donc répétée. Celle d'un vieux continent qui s'entre-déchire. Celle d'une jeune nation, la vôtre, qui vient à la rescousse de vieux pays, les nôtres. Vous étiez au Moyen-Orient. Vous étiez en Méditerranée. Vous étiez à Bardia, en Libye, à la frontière de l'Égypte. Vous étiez en Grèce, en Crète, en Syrie. Vous étiez à El Alamein. Vous étiez en Sicile, sur le front occidental. Et puis, bien sûr, vous étiez dans le Pacifique, en Nouvelle-Guinée et aux Philippines. Partout où les Alliés se battaient, l'Australie se battait. Parfois pour défendre son territoire, le plus souvent pour défendre celui des autres. Avec sang-froid, avec ferveur et avec cette bravoure pleine de panache qu'on appelle, je crois, désormais l'Anzac Spirit. Oui, il faut parfois mourir loin de chez soi pour honorer et défendre son pays. Cette réalité très dure, amère parfois, des familles françaises, britanniques et australiennes la connaissent encore aujourd'hui. C'est pourquoi vous me permettrez, Monsieur le Premier ministre, Votre Altesse, d'avoir une pensée pour nos soldats, les vôtres, les nôtres, qui risquent leur vie au Sahel, en Syrie, au Moyen-Orient et ailleurs pour protéger la nôtre. À travers eux, dans la solitude de l'éloignement, j'aime imaginer que c'est un peu de cette fraternité des tranchées qui survit et que vous appelez le mateship. On m'a dit que, peu avant sa disparition, la presse australienne surnommait Alec Campbell « The Last Sentinel of Gallipoli ». C'est peut-être la mission qui nous est confiée, celle d'être des sentinelles vigilantes, qui veillent sur la mémoire des Alec Campbell, des Lazare Ponticelli et de leurs millions de camarades dont le sacrifice nous oblige. Des sentinelles qui veillent sur des valeurs qui nous rapprochent et qui sont bien plus vastes que les océans qui nous séparent. Nous n'oublierons jamais. Lest we forget.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I now invite His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, to deliver a reading.
The Australians who served on the Western Front were not professional soldiers. They were not conscripted, but were volunteers from all walks of life, in uniform until the war ended, or until death or wounds claimed them. As they awaited the battles that they knew would come in 1918, a section of 19th Battalion men rested in a billet behind the line. Private Frank Purnell, who 2 years before had been a school teacher in Wagga Wagga, and where by coincidence I have just been, described the scene. The hut is warm, the fire means a fortune to the soldier. Some half-dozen sit or recline on the heap of mysteriously gathered wood. Jack is one of the few original men and has never been wounded or sick. His old mates have left him one by one until he is almost a lonely man. Some are back in Australia, home again. Some are still in hospital in Blighty. Some are in a rest camp in France, Spelling. The others, heroes every one, repose for the most part beneath the soil of Flanders. In one corner, a man, 40 years of age, writes to his mother in Westralia. Alongside him, sitting on his blankets, with a 2-inch candle set on a steel helmet, is a corporal writing to his wife and little girl. Opposite, a lad from Lismore takes stock of the contents of a parcel. There is a towel, which Reg gives to a comrade who has none, all packed by thoughtful and loving sisters. Next to the Lismore lad, a Burwood man reads a 17-page letter written by his wife. You notice his smile as he reads, that he reads the whole letter twice, and some parts he reads 3 times. Then he, happy, folds his letter and places it in his tunic pocket. To complete the group, one must not forget those who shave by candlelight, some standing, some kneeling, nor those who have already made their beds and are safely ensconced in them. Soon, all will be in bed. Outside, in the gloom, the sentries pace their beat and keep watch over the sleeping camp. We do not know what became of these men in 1918. On average, it is almost certain that 1 in 5 of them would have lost their lives during the months that followed, and that some of those parents, wives, and children to whom they were writing, in the scene Private Purnell described so touchingly, would have received official letters bringing the most desolating grief. More still would have been wounded. Those who survived would return to rebuild their lives and forge their character into the great country they would help build. They would remember forever their many mates, their fellow diggers they left behind here and before in places like Gallipoli, and whose spirit will forever be part of Australia's identity. Those men and their loved ones trusted that such costly sacrifice would be honored. Today, as we mark a century since they gave their lives, let us resolve to continue to fulfill their trust so that every passing year will only add to the measure of their honor.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness. I now invite Principal Chaplain Darren Yench, the Director General Chaplaincy of the Australian Army, to lead us in a prayer of remembrance and a prayer for peace.
As we pause in reflection, people of faith turn their thoughts to prayers. If it is your want, join me as I pray in my tradition, or in silence, reflect in your own way. In this quiet, sombre, and beautiful place, we pause at this dawn to reflect and to remember before you, eternal God, the tragedy of the battles that occurred around this sacred memorial 100 years past, but always to remain poignant and fresh in our national memories. Australian troops were far from home, protecting the lives and liberties of innocent people in peril. As we recall their legacy of devotion to duty and of sacrifice for the security and welfare of others, make us, we pray, a people zealous for peace. may we have the grace to seek a spirit of justice, generosity, and peacefulness for all people, thus reflecting your will in our world. Amen. A prayer for peace. God of the nations, you are the one who reminds us that the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. Have mercy on our broken and divided world. May we always be ambassadors of a lasting and just peace, that all people may learn to live together as members of one family of humanity. I pray this in the name of the one who died to bring peace, Jesus, the Prince of Peace. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Padre. Wreaths will now be laid by official representatives. The first wreath will be laid by His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales. To acknowledge the bond between Australia and France, the next wreaths will be laid jointly by the Honourable Malcolm Turnbull MP, Prime Minister of Australia, on behalf of the Government and the people of Australia, and Monsieur Edouard Philippe, Prime Minister of the French Republic, on behalf of the Government and the people of the French Republic. The next wreaths will be laid on behalf of the Kingdom of Belgium, Canada and New Zealand by Miss Julie Peters, Captain Yves Germain and Her Excellency Miss Jane Coombs. The next wreaths will be laid on behalf of the Republic of South Africa, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the United States of America by Brigadier Charles Schumann, His Excellency Lord Llewellyn, and Colonel Eve Douglas. The next wreaths will be laid by Senator the Honourable Maurice Payne, the Australian Minister for Defence, Madame Dariussec, the Secretary of State for the French Minister for the Armed Forces, and the Honourable Warren Snowden MP on behalf of the Federal Opposition. The next wreaths will be laid by the Honourable Tony Abbott MP, Miss Gay Brodman MP, Senator Darren Hinch, and Monsieur Laurent Somon, Conseil départemental de la Somme. The next wreaths will be laid on behalf of Australian state governments from New South Wales, Tasmania, South Australia and Queensland by Mr Scott Farlow MLC, Mr Ivan Dean MLC, Mr James Mraz and Miss Isabel Jardine. The next wreaths will be laid on behalf of the Australian Defence Force and the French Armed Forces by Air Chief Marshal Mark Binskin AC and General Francois Lecointe. The next wreaths will be laid by the mayors of Fouar, Villers-Bretonneux and Fromelles by Monsieur Bernard Brochot, Dr. Patrick Simon Ayo and Monsieur Jean-Gabriel Masson. The next wreaths will be laid by the mayors of Pozières, Péronne and Le Hamel by Monsieur Bernard Delatte AM, Miss Thérèse Desjeux and Monsieur Stéphane Chavon. The final wreaths will be laid on behalf of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, the Royal British Legion, the Returned and Services League of Australia, and all veterans of Australia, Great Britain and France by Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, KCVO CB ADC, Mr Rodney Bedford, Mr George Jones AM, and Major Andrew Lean. It is now time to reflect and to silently remember all those who have served and died in war. Please stand for the ode, which will be followed by the last post, 1 minute silence and reveille. The ode will be recited by Warrant Officer Class 1 Brian Moore, the Regimental Sergeant Major Ceremonial for the Australian Defence Force, and the act de souvenir will be recited by the Mayor of Villers-Bretonneux, Dr. Patrick Simon, AO.
Catapult party, attention.
They went with songs, they were young. Straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Ils ne vieilliront pas, contrairement à nous que auront cette chance. Ils ne seront pas épuisés par l'âge ni condamnés par les années. À la tombée de la nuit et au petit matin, nous nous souviendrons d'eux. Nous nous souviendrons d'eux. Ne les oublions jamais.
Catapult party, present. Arms. Catapult party, shoulder, arms.
Please remain standing for the national anthems of France and Australia.
Catapult Party, present. Arms.
Allons enfants de la patrie, le jour de gloire est arrivé. Contre nous de la tyrannie, l'État s'éclate élevé. L'État s'éclate élevé. Entrant des vues dans nos campagnes, mugissent et féroces et soldats. Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are young and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is earth by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains and let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Catapult Party, shoulder. Arms.
I now invite Principal Chaplain Yench to offer a final blessing.
Eternal One, as we depart this hallowed ground, this sacred place of remembrance, especially of those Australians who have given their lives for the sake of others, may we go forth as a people who embrace life, hope and light, holding fast to all that is good and seeking such blessings in the lives of others. May we truly know your divine blessing in our journey through this life and beyond. Amen.
Thank you, Padre. We began our service this morning with the mounting of the catafalque party, and now the catafalque party will be dismounted. The catafalque party will be led away from the memorial by the colour party of the 51st Battalion, the Far North Queensland Regiment.
Catapult Party, present. Arms. Catapult Party, shoulder. Arms. Catapult Party, outwards. Turn. Catapult Party, quick. March.
Please be seated. The final part of our service this morning will be the public wreath laying. If you have registered to lay a wreath or a tribute, please make your way forward now. Could I ask everyone not laying a wreath to please remain in your seats during this period, and for the wreath layers to move to and from the memorial as described during registration. I call first the direct descendants of the First World War, followed by other government representatives not included in the official wreath laying, then regimental and unit ex-service organisations and associations, followed by school groups, and finally members of the general public who registered. Wreaths will now be laid by the following people: Kim Sadlier in honour of her grandfather and great uncles, Mari and Chris Watson in honour of David Coyne, the Kerr and Morgan families in honour of Robert Morgan, Diane Cooper and Jack Thompson in honour of Arthur and Reginald Thorne. Then Commander Mills RAN and children Sachel and Adeline in honour of Robert Knox. Deborah McDowell in honour of TW Glasgow and the 13th Brigade. Jacqueline Dawson in honour of Alexander Carter. Colleen Dooley in honour of Ernest Stratton and Tom Dooley. Then Janet Pickup and David Pickering in honour of Roy, Norman and Clement Gribble. Robert Arthur in honour of Hugo Arthur. Anthony and Denise Goodwin in honour of Victor Harris. Christopher Murtagh in honour of Henry and Samuel Leonard and the fallen firefighters Stunts, Gordon, Conway and Griffiths. Robert West in honour of Sylvester West. David and Wendy Adams in honour of Thomas Allen. Ian and Mari Smith in honour of Stanley Kitchen. Ross Mason in honour of James and Albert Tracy, Edmund Hellier and Peter Arrow. The Edmondson family in honour of Jack, Harvey, Keith, Gordon and Margaret Edmondson. John and Kay Thurgood in honour of Robert Carr. Patricia Francis in honour of Thomas Skelly. Judy Lynch in honour of James Lynch. The Turlin family in honour of Lewis Turlin. Sergeant Claire Edwards in honour of Harry Edwards. William George and Marcia Sorrell in honour of Reginald George. Shane and Anne Boyd in honour of James Boyd. Barry Chapman in honour of AJR Taylor. Diane Henderson in honour of John Bonner. Greg Henderson and Sharon James in honour of Charles Mackey. Dr. Gerald, Noah and Raphael Segal on behalf of the AMA in honour of Arthur Pownell. Marilyn Philby in honour of Lewis Lear. Lene and Lachlan Palumbo in honour of William Pryor. the Johns and Janiak families in honour of Harry Slee. Christopher Thine in honour of Albert Berry. Meredith McDermott and Peter Burke in honour of Frederick Burgess. The Littlewood family in honour of William Webb and James Fox. Nicole and Ebony Maxwell in honour of Herbert Fielder. Julie Kerr and Peter, Ursula and Tony McLaughlin in honour of Edward Burke. Rhonda Harris in honour of Walter Allen. Mark and Elizabeth Brandsgrove in honour of Owen Brandsgrove. The Hunter family in honour of Gerald Osborne. Shane Holding and Diane Bishop in honour of Henry and Charles Holding and William Steele. Adrian and Paul McGinn and Angela Soletto in honour of Edward McGinn. Carol and Judith Glatzner in honour of Charles Glatzner. Mary Roberson in honour of Harold Roberson and Thomas Byrne. Dr. Mary Smith and John Beaton in honour of Edward Clifford. Amanda Buttonshaw in honour of Edison Gordon and Robert Miller. Faye and Kerry Cruikshank in honour of William Curry. Damien and Catherine Newton in honour of Arthur and Thomas Ellis. Annette Daly in honour of Herbert Williams. The Common family in honour of John Gavin. Ross and Mary Ann McIntyre in honour of John Bennett. Jacqueline Hanson and the Corish family in honour of George Hartwell. Donna Willard Axum in honour of Hilton Willard. Erica French in honour of Eric French. Fiona McFadzean in honour of Rowley Douglas and Bertie Bull. Deidre Ward and Dallas Foster in honour of William Ward. Janice White in honour of W. Harold Beadle. Greg Campbell and Suzanne Evans in honour of James Hall and Anthony Hall. Peter Evans in honour of H.L. Wheeler, D.L. Mackenzie and B.G. Mackenzie. Andrew, Maria and Caitlin Reid in honour of their grandfather, Morris Reid. Erica French in honour of Eric French and Bruce Hart. Elaine Foote, Dr. Lynette Tuvlesky and Bronwyn McKeering in honour of George MacDonald. Judy Hutchison and Stephen and Lindy Dale in honour of Clifford, Malcolm and Leonard Wallace. Janine Bourne in honour of John Hurley. Tracy Porta-Arinos and Susan Hellier in honour of Reginald Hellier. Paul Benson in honour of Reginald Benson. Colin Hambrecht in honour of John Croft. Andrew Marr on behalf of Legacy Australia in honour of his grandfather. Cecilia Lai and the Pratton family in honour of Henry Ringland. Francine Clemson in honour of Harold Johnson. Carol Nielsen in honour of Henry Ellis. Rodney and Warren Bradley in honour of Thomas Bradley. Robert Lee on behalf of Greenbank RSL in honour of Leonard Hines. Yannick Kovac Lefebvre in honour of Yves Lefebvre. Tanya and Shannon Darling in honour of George Seagate. Megan Rout in honour of Leslie Rout. Mark Barrett in honour of James Barrott. The Colin Bransgrove family in honour of Thomas Dixon. William Wilson in honour of William Keyes. Denise Wilson in honour of William Sackley. Errol Miller in honour of Joseph Payne. Rob Fittock in honour of John Firth and William Thomas. Russell Clark in honour of C and C.H. Freeman. Deborah Panaretto in honour of Walter Bishop and the 5th Division. The Horton family in honour of Harold Noonan. John Sullivan and Moira Weeks in honour of John O'Donoghue. Wendy Sullivan in honour of William Wright. Dr. Louise Smythe in honour of Norbert Smythe and Charles Hoy. Michael and Peter Smith in honour of Harry Smith. Ralph Bruce in honour of George Bruce. Eileen Furlonger in honour of Sydney Bignell. Dorothy Joyce Wood in honour of Alan Wood. Rob and Pat Clark in honour of Roy Clark. Susan Hall and Lyndall O'Brien in honour of Fred Anderson. William Pryor in honour of South Australian police officers Blackie, Parsons, Nelson and Jones, killed in action in France. Christine Oosterloo in honour of Charlie Treblico. The Banks family in honour of George Hobbs. Jane Graham in honour of Douglas Graham. Howard and Cameron Smith in honour of Reginald Smith. Elizabeth Rovine in honour of William Diplock. Darryl Coombs in honour of Charles, Thomas and Russell Warren. Paul and Robert Harvey and Krish and Sharon Lanham in honour of Harold Richardson. Peter Headley and the McComb family in honour of John, Wilfred and Reginald Avery and George and Harold Pompey Elliott. Duncan Lee in honour of John Murphy. Rebecca Devitt and Kristen Devitt in honour of Frank Devitt. Kieran McCarthy in honour of Thomas Davis. Leonard McCarthy in honour of Joseph and Henry Blunt and Oliver Wees. Jodie Polgaze in honour of Ernest Polgaze. Claire Jeffries and Pamela Wood in honour of Frederick Platten. Karen, Max and Miles Carrick in honour of Daniel and Colin McAllister. Judith Clayton in honour of William Clark. Phil Jackson in honour of Oswald Bourne. Stephen and Jane Struss in honour of Hubert Selwyn Smith. Stuart and Robert Giles in honour of Frederick and William Giles. Marion Giles in honour of Albert Lowison. Jesse and Betty Burke in honour of Edmund Burke. Alison Benson in honour of Privates Taringa, Taparatu and Vavia of the Cook Islands. Emma and Jennifer Burchell in honour of Francis Wormold. Paul Wicks in honour of George Hall. Vicky Stokes and Lavinia Stevenson in honour of Charles Gill. Troy and Gloria Daniels in honour of Victor Welsh. Donna Fechner in honour of James Hurahan. Joy Cook in honour of John Mackenzie. Patrick and Liz Riley in honour of John Draddy. Trevor and Bernadette Young in honour of Franco Callahan and Robert Daly. Di Heffernan in honour of Frederick Barth. Warren Martin in honour of Henry Martin. Judy Martin in honour of Charles Linklater, George White and George and Albert Smith. David Warland in honour of D.H. Warland and the Fifth Field Company Engineers. Rowan Chipperfield and Joanne Kelso in honour of Cornelis Gray. Danielle Bryce in honour of Leslie Yeoman. Philip Douglas in honour of Linton Anderson. William Gamel in honour of James Gamel. Leanne Carson and Lorraine Fraser in honour of Thomas Polson. Michael and Denise Harrison in honour of Rupert Boniface and Horace Pickett. The Wood family in honour of Michael Carberry. Richard Patterson in honour of Arthur Osborne. Robin Short in honour of Theo Blatchford and Rox Kavanagh. Carolyn Eddington in honour of Osmond Eddington. Christopher Latham and Alan Roxburgh in honour of Stephen Latham. Claire Honegger on behalf of the Glenn and McGrath family in honour of Vivian McGrath. Stephen Cotter in honour of Hercules Lurd. Andrew Jenrick in honour of Richard Gray. Jeff Humphreys, Judith Anderson and Lindsay Colwell in honour of Christian Nommensen, Leonard Davidson and Albert Colwell. Reverend Ian and Carolyn Altman in honour of William Swanell. Bernadette and Trevor Young in honour of Robert Daly. Peter and Elwyn White in honour of Clarence Wisner. Julia Byrne and Evelyn Peake in honour of Willie Dilger. Robert Peake and Robert Roy Peake in honour of Clive Crowley. Russell Pollock in honour of Clarence Dan. Sharon, Joshua and Matthew Phillips in honour of Philip Gilman. Vicky Jenrick on behalf of London Legacy. David Fricker and Louise Doyle on behalf of the National Archives of Australia. Dr. David Hudson in honour of all Torres Strait Islander and Indigenous veterans. Joe Flick on behalf of the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council. Penelope Ellis and Lily Bowyer on behalf of the Hepburn Shire Council and the Dalesford Secondary School. Detective Sergeant Jason Ferns on behalf of the New South Wales Police Force. Anthony Aitken and Susan Minchinton on behalf of the City of Greater Geelong. Kevin Walsh on behalf of the City of Greater Dandenong in honour of the 52nd Battalion, the Gippsland Regiment. Harry Packwood, Fenlon Miller, Lillian Ward and Tyler Craven Griffiths on behalf of the Premier's Anzac Prize, Queensland. Australia's Northern Territory Chief Minister's Anzac Spirit Study Tour. The 2018 Frank McDonald Memorial Prize from Tasmania. Lee Lieberman and Jan McKay on behalf of the General Sir John Monash Foundation. Nicholas Brown and Kevin Lawson on behalf of the Harvey Bay RSL. Peggy Jacobs and Maureen Rush on behalf of the Gympie RSL. Squadron Leader Hugh Dolan, Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Chipman and Colonel Anthony McGee on behalf of the Hampton RSL. Peter McAndrew on behalf of the Maroochy RSL. Mark and Rachel Turlin on behalf of the Mildura RSL. Jean Clark on behalf of the Kenmore-Mogul RSL. Craig and Elizabeth McGregor on behalf of the McGregor family and the Leet RSL. Major Ben Lansky, CSC, on behalf of the 51st Battalion, the Far North Queensland Regiment. Cadet Under Officer Zane Bailey, on behalf of the Australian Air Force Cadets. Barry Parisia, Graham Handley and Brian Walters, on behalf of the Castle Hill and District RSL. Errol Arundel, on behalf of the Ballarat RSL. Kenneth Keesing, on behalf of the 11th and the 51st Battalion families, Perth. Christine Winterbottom, on behalf of the Armed Forces Bikers Charity. Henry Ashton, on behalf of the Sandgate Subsection Naval Association of Australia and the Bray Park Strathpine RSL. Andrew Brownlee, on behalf of Friends of the 15th Brigade. George Charlton, on behalf of the New South Wales Association of Jewish Ex-Servicemen and Women. Cadet Louisa McCarthy, on behalf of 203 Squadron, Australian Air Force Cadets. Paul Walsh, on behalf of the Clarence RSL. Patricia Langford, on behalf of the Ratchetted Brook Association, Melbourne. Christine McCormack, on behalf of the West Australian branch of the Partners of Veterans Association of Australia. Cheryl Walsh, on behalf of the Women's Royal Australian Army Corps Association, Tasmania. Patrick Grew and Blake Crawford, on behalf of St Ignatius College, Riverview. Ellie Tills and Connor Hugo, on behalf of the St Joseph's High School, Aberdeen. Zoe Kellner and Cullen Musenberger, on behalf of St Catherine's Catholic College, Singleton. Cody Donlan, Maddie Layton and Felicity Hess, on behalf of Trinity Christian School, Canberra. Isabel, Sam and Riley Banovich, on behalf of the Sutherland North Public School. Caitlin Morgan and Cooper Bales, on behalf of Flinders Christian Community College. Miranda Johnson-Jones and Sam Timke, on behalf of Bendigo Southeast College. Reuben Farr, Christopher Lawrenson and Alicia Turner, on behalf of the Lake Joondalup Baptist College. Emmeline McCarthy, on behalf of All Hallows School, Brisbane. The McCollum family, on behalf of the GM State School. Gail Smith, on behalf of All Saints College, Bull Creek, Perth. Ali Benson, on behalf of the Crestwood High School, Sydney. Shauna Harrison, on behalf of the Methodist Ladies College, Claremont. Michael Lucas, on behalf of the Christian Brothers College, Adelaide. Livingston Christian College. Michael Lucas, Christian Brothers College. Taylor Stevenson and Catalina Soto Caladrin, on behalf of the Elizabeth MacArthur High School. Samantha Eisenhuth and Susanna Fryer, on behalf of the Mount Annan High School. Susan Pollock, Aspley State High School, Queensland. Vicky Stokes, on behalf of the 2nd Adelaide Scouts. James Austin, in honour of all Tasmanian veterans. Peter John McGowan, in honour of Numbers 9 and 10 platoons, C Company 51st Battalion. Carolyn Sinclair, on behalf of Elsmore, New South Wales and the Tozer and Colley families. Captain Laura Cook and Mr Gregory Cook, on behalf of the Cook family. Pam Griffiths, on behalf of the May family. Julia Bunn, Evelyn, Robert and Robert Roy Peake. Anthony, Karen and Amy Clark, on behalf of the Clark family. Jeanette Daly, on behalf of the Temple and Daly families. Bernard Harrington, on behalf of the Harrington family. Suzette Bagnall, on behalf of the Bagnall family. Thomas Goosewinkle and Bettina Schifferstein. Kay Ross, on behalf of the Ross family. Jeffrey Seymour and Peter Keemsum. Carmen Kleindas on behalf of the Partridge family in honour of the 33rd Battalion. Bill Hyde in honour of the 30th Battalion. Arthur and Colleen Harvey in honour of the 12th Battalion. Pamela Verco in honour of the 27th Battalion. The relatives of Clifford Stribling representing the Tarlee community of South Australia. The Rockford family in honour of Valentine Rockford. Carol and Greg Reid in honour of Michael Carberry. Colleen Bransgrove in honour of Thomas Dixon. Judy and Warren Martin in honour of Charles Linklater, George and Albert Smith and Henry Martin. Joy Cook in honour of John Mackenzie. Donna Fechner in honour of James Hurrian. Peter Jones in honour of Arthur Jones. Pat and Liz Riley in honour of John Drady. Diana Hoffman in honour of Frederick Barth. Sylvia Campbell in honour of Clement Shaw. Anthony Clark in honour of uncles in the Clark family. John Bergen in honour of Michael Cox. Leanne Flatman in honour of Edward Walter. Matilda Richardson on behalf of the Windsor State School. George William Morgan in honour of George Morgan. Will Sprake in honour of James Bethema. Jacqueline Dawson in honour of Alexander Carter. James Gowan on behalf of Mariba RSL. Rachel Leeson on behalf of the Simpson Prize. Susan Green in honour of Walter Sibley and John Finn. Darryl Green in honour of Gordon Dunlop and Alfred Green. Elizabeth Gill in honour of Tom, Jim Johnson and Len Rao. Christine Gardner in honour of her great uncles. Nathalie Bustamante in honour of the Australian fallen. Warren Lear, Joanne Vanderwelt and Marilyn and Michael Philby in honour of Lewis Lear. Neil Leckie, Terry Benjamin and Rick Hodel in honour of Fred Wrigley. Barbara and John Eldred in honour of John Aldred. John Laurie and Judith Ann Barnes in honour of Norman, Charlie, Leslie and Howard Laurie. Kenneth and Christine White in honour of Alistair White and Frederick Branch. Elizabeth and William George in honour of Reg George. Annabelle Forrest in honour of Robert Watkinson and Elliot Riggs. Megan White on behalf of the White family. Danny Neve on behalf of the Royal Australian Infantry Corps. Flinders Christian Community College in honour of the Australian fallen. Glenda and Alan Kerr in honour of George Kerr. Peter Watson in honour of Victor Hawkins. Cheryl Holmes in memory of her grandfather. Trevor Booker in honour of Frederick, David and Frank Fairley. Luke Barty and Connor Craigie on behalf of Prince Alfred College. Nikki Archie Waring on behalf of the Spirit of Remembrance. David Smallacombe and Helen Moon in honour of Percival Evans Piper and Gordon Phillips Smallacombe. Charles Angus in honour of Thomas Glasgow. Joe Lavery in honour of Arthur McGay. Mandy Wiedemann on behalf of the descendants of Henry Bryce. Harriet Bestick on behalf of the Bestick and Johnston families. Catherine Craven in honour of John Curtis. Paula Cole in honour of Edward Dunn and Cecil Stevenson. Warrnambool College, Victoria. The Rowell family. The Renee Knowles in honour of Harold Foster. The Dodderidge family in honour of Harold Dodderidge and Lyle Duncan. Grace Thompson in honour of her great uncle Percival Aspinall. Sandra Dodderidge in honour of animals who served and fell in war. Paul Sayer on behalf of William Sayer and the 12th Battalion from Tasmania. Peachy, Bronwyn and David in honour of their grandfather. Douglas Templar in honour of Rupert Purbrick. Diane and Wayne Lockhart in honour of Alan Giles and Harry Harborne. Mari and John Langens in honour of George Cruikshank. James Warren in honour of Frank Massey. Maureen Sargent in honour of her grandfather Michael Ferricks. John Chappell and Oliver Stonestreet in honour of his grandfather. John Hick in honour of his grandfather. Peter Lister in honour of Anthony Lister. Alex Ronaldson, Matt Hogarth on behalf of the family of J.J. Talbot Hobbs in honour of the soldiers of the AIF. Rory Russo and Dimitri Asinarius on behalf of Marist College Cogra. Andrea and Lisa Marie Gordon and Jennifer Collis in honour of William and Arthur Janner. Barbara Hosson in honour of Sydney Smith. Peter Martin in honour of the Royal Australian Navy on behalf of APT. Delma Murphy in honour of John Harris. Kylie Gazzard, Ethan Graham and Josh and Shaylee Bradbury on behalf of Moolumbar High School. Sarah Hall and Lachlan Gregg on behalf of the Tweed RSL sub-branch. Nat Harnett and Matt Platter on behalf of the Currumbin RSL sub-branch. Mia Morris and Charles Bullis on behalf of the Moolumbar RSL sub-branch. Hayley and Gay Bennett in honour of Alan Bellingham and William Ashmore. Jenny Jeeves in honour of Frederick Tugwell. Christchurch Grammar School in honour of the Anzacs. Philip Clairbout and Carmen Kleindienst in honour of the 9th Infantry Brigade. Delphine and Lee Annette in honour of William Colletts. Desley Hutchison on behalf of the Foreman, Martin and Leopold families. Rebecca Davitt in honour of Francis Davitt. The final tribute will be laid by Kat Van Bruggen and Josh Bosang of the Voices Ability Choir from Brisbane. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our Anzac Day dawn service here on the Western Front to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Villers-Bretonneux. Thank you.